Good morning. Today we'll talk about operant conditioning. Thorndike's puzzle box is a very famous example. Thorndike was very interested to study animal intelligence, and he hated cats with passion. So what he did was he put the cat in a box and put a bowl of food outside and waited. What happened was the cat learned. He figured out a way to get out of the box. If he pressed a certain button, for example, or pressed the lever, and then he was able to get out and get his food. So slowly the cat learned that every single time he presses on that lever or that button, he gets out of the box and gets the food. And it follows the law of effect. So if a response occurs, so if the cat presses on the button and is followed by satisfaction, hopefully him getting out of the box and eating the food, there's a connection that is formed, and which leads to the response being more likely and more probable to happen again in the future. Operant conditioning is learning based on the consequences of the responding. Operant conditioning works the best when it follows a correct response. Skinner box also is known as the operant conditioning chamber, and it's the apparatus designed to study operant conditioning in animals. What happens here is the rat slowly learns to associate that every single time he responds on the lever, presses on the lever, he gets potentially the food comes out, or water. Slowly he learns to associate that whenever he presses on this, food shows up, or water, and the response of him pressing on the lever increases. Please stop now and check out the actual videos of my rat when I was an undergrad and took a learning class in psychology. We all had to attend to a rat every day, every week throughout the semester, and we had to teach the rat different things. So in one of the videos you will see the rat picking up a marble and putting it through a hole in the floor, and only then he gets the water. So slowly you start teaching the rat. So for example, the most basic thing we did was to teach it to press on the lever in order to get water. So how do you start even to teach the rat that way? Well, what you do is every single time, let's say the rat is in this area, you give him water. What happens, he learns that, okay, every single time I'm in this area of the box, I get water. So what happens, the rat will start staying more in this area. At some point, by accident, he might touch the lever with one paw, not even pressing on it, just touch it. Then you give it water. Slowly, you now reward not when if he's in this side of the box, you don't give him water when he's just simply in this, but only when he touches the lever. Slowly, the rat learns to associate him touching the lever and getting water. Potentially, then he touches with it. You stop after a while, and then he puts 2 of his paws on the lever. Then you give him water. Now you give him water only when he puts 2 of his paws on the lever. The next stage would be potentially whenever he presses on the lever, then he gets the water. So slowly you teach the rat to do whatever you want. Also, please check out the YouTube clip showing how 2 rats are playing basketball. Alright, I hope you found these videos amusing and interesting, and kind of clarifying more what you can do with operant conditioning. The biggest part of operant conditioning, or there are two main parts to it, is reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement is an internal or external event that increases the frequency of a behavior. And there are primary reinforcers and secondary ones. So primary reinforcers are non-learned reinforcers, so usually those that satisfy physiological needs. For example, whenever the rat presses on the lever, it gets water. It would be considered a primary reinforcer. A secondary reinforcer is a learned reinforcer, and it's often one that gain reinforcing properties by association with a primary reinforcer. So, for example, token reinforce. A tangible secondary reinforce, such as money, gold stars, poker chips, etc. Or social reinforce. Reinforcement based on receiving attention, approval, or affection from another person. So it's not necessarily satisfying your physiological needs, but hey, every single time I go to work, I get paid. That would be considered a secondary reinforcer from the token reinforcer category. And there can be two types of reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement, which is a pattern in which reinforcement follows every correct response. So every single time the rat presses on the lever, he gets water. Or partial reinforcement, a pattern in which only a portion of all responses are reinforced. For example, every second press on the lever, the rat will get water, or every minute that he's pressing on the lever, he will get water. So which is better? And once again, the very famous answer in psychology, well, it depends. Partial reinforcement is a little bit better for against extinction. So for example, if the rat learns that every single time he presses the lever, he gets water, if he doesn't get water one time, the association might be a little bit jeopardized. But if the rat knows that he gets partial reinforcement, so not every single time he presses on the lever he's going to get the water, it is better to withstand extinction, which is him forgetting the learned response. Punishment is the second component of operant conditioning, and it's the stimulus that decreases the frequency of a behavior. So timing, it's very important that the punishment, so if there is a certain behavior that you would like to decrease its frequency, such as smoking, for example, it's very important that the punishment will follow immediately after the undesired response occurs. It's also important consistency, so the punishment happens after each time the response occurs. And the intensity. Mild punishment only temporarily suppresses a response. So you need to make sure that there isn't any type of reinforcement that occurs consequentially with the punishment. Also, punishment can be an uncomfortable or painful. However, it might lead people to fear or resent certain situations. Due to the classical conditioning of them associating the punishment with their physiological response of fear or resentment. Also, they might be escape learning due to the punishment. So they're learning to make a response in order to end an aversive stimuli. So they're trying to get away or run away from the punishment. So it's not necessarily that they're learning for the sake of learning, but rather than just to escape the punishment. Also, avoidance learning, learning to make a response in order to postpone or prevent a discomfort. So, for example, lying in order not to get punished. And punishment can be viewed as a way of aggression, right? And though it might decrease a certain behavior, it can actually increase aggression. So it's very important to use punishment accordingly. So just to summarize, whenever you are talking about increasing a desirable behavior, so you want a certain behavior to be more likely to occur, we call it reinforcement. If you want a behavior to decrease, if you don't want a certain behavior to keep happening, it's called punishment. The positive and negative components of that, think about them from a mathematical perspective. Positive is when you actually add a stimulus, whereas negative is when you omit a stimulus. So for example, if you want to increase the behavior of getting A's, it would be reinforcement, right? If you add a prize for every A that you get, for example, that would be considered a positive reinforcement because you added something to the equation kinda in order to increase that behavior. Stimuli control is the stimuli is present when an operant response is acquired, tend to control when the response is made. And the two elements of stimulus control is generalization and discrimination. So generalization is a tendency to respond to stimuli similar to those that preceded an operant reinforcement. So the dog, for example, jumps on you when you're at the kitchen table and you give him some human food. The dog learns every single time he jumps, so that's the behavior, he gets rewarded with delicious food. So that would be considered a positive reinforcement. However, the dog starts jumping on you when you sit at your desk trying to do homework. The dog made the generalization that whenever you're sitting, not necessarily at the kitchen table, but at a desk even, he might get some sort of delicious treat. So generalization has occurred. Discrimination is the tendency to make an operant response when stimuli previously associated with reward are present, and to withhold a response when the stimuli associated with the non-reward are present. So for example, when you don't reward your dog with food when you sit at your desk, slowly the dog will learn to differentiate between the stimuli that leads to the reward, so the kitchen table, and a stimuli that don't lead to the reward, the desk. And police dogs actually are taught to discriminate between contraband and explosive versus some sort of gym clothes that have been in the backpack for a very long time, for example. So the dog learns to discriminate between the different smells and the ones that he should be focusing on and notifying the people about, and the ones that he shouldn't. Alright, that's all I have on operant conditioning.